Hello and welcome to the Pole Position Podcast. I know it has been a while, but here we are with episode 7 of the podcast looking at the Singapore Grand Prix. And well, it wasn't a bad race. I mean, obviously I have missed a few with these podcasts that have been better. I mean, of course, looking at the German Grand Prix, the best race I think we've had since Canada 2011. But the Singapore Grand Prix, yeah, it did provide some good entertainment, and I'm going to look at 6 important things that happened in the Singapore Grand Prix. So let's start with number 1. And number 1 is Sebastian Vettel. Yes, 392 days have gone by, but he has finally won a race. First race win, obviously, of the season, and I think he really needed this because, obviously, Charles Leclerc having 2 back-to-back wins in Belgium and Italy, obviously Monza, home of Ferrari. The Italian fans absolutely loved that race, and I think Vettel definitely needed it, and I think especially because of the fact that he made a mistake in that race in Monza, and I think very disappointed in himself. Obviously, Sebastian Vettel. A lot of people have been talking about, he's past it, he's out of the game, he's making too many mistakes. Some people have even been talking about, whether he would be replaced for next season. But for me, Sebastian Vettel is still a top driver, and he's a 4-time world champion. So he has to be still at the top of the game. If he feels like he isn't, then he should be the one to step down. But he ended his 392-day race win drought. I think he did an amazing job. Obviously, the strategy played into his hands. Charles Leclerc had a fantastic weekend in terms of qualifying on pole. And I think even in the race, he did pretty well. But obviously, Sebastian Vettel was helped by the Ferrari team strategy of getting Vettel to pit first. Leclerc did one more lap, and Vettel managed to overtake him while Leclerc was coming out of the pits. So, yeah, I think Sebastian Vettel really needed it. I think over Leclerc, Vettel needed it more. I think Leclerc doesn't have too much to worry about, if I'm honest. But in terms of Vettel, obviously dedicated the win straight after, as soon as he got out of the car, to the fans around the world. And I think in terms of what happened in Monza, he was sort of saying, thank you very much for all these kind messages. And I've got it on the screen here. So many letters, so many nice messages, people telling their own stories about how sometimes it's not going well for them. And if you just keep believing in yourself and you can do it. And he says, I had a lot of strength and belief in the car today on the Sunday, and obviously that paid off. And yeah, I mean, congratulations to Sebastian Vettel. I hope this winning races continues for him, because I still like Vettel. I still think he's a character on the grid, and obviously in the paddock, and I think he needs to show that he is still a top driver. I believe it, but there's people out there that obviously don't and feel that he shouldn't be around anymore. But I think it's great to see Sebastian Vettel at the top, and I hope it continues. Point number 2 is his teammate Charles Leclerc. Like I've said, just in the Vettel one, I don't think he should feel too hard done by. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, he had an excellent qualifying on the Saturday. Even on the radio said he made a couple of mistakes on the lap, but he still managed to beat the likes of Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen, and obviously Sebastian Vettel, his teammate. Had a great race as well. I mean, if there's one bad thing to say about the race, it's the fact that for the first 20 or so laps, it was a little bit boring to watch as a fan. I mean, obviously on the pit wall it probably wasn't, because they were thinking, how are we going to get past them? Which strategy is going to be the better one? Obviously Christian Horner was on the radio on Sky Sports F1 saying, we're not sure how it's going to play out. We're just sort of waiting for Ferrari to sort of make their move, and once that happens, everybody else can sort of make their own decisions on what they're going to do. And I think obviously that helped with Sebastian Vettel, taking the lead. Sort of all waiting for it to sort of pan out. And I think that's the only criticism for me of the weekend, is the fact that the first 20 laps were a bit, they were a bit, just sort of waiting for things to happen. I think Lando Norris and Alex Albon said after the race that they weren't really that tired. Normally Singapore Grand Prix is like the most That's the one that the racers prepare for, the drivers prepare for, because they know it's so demanding. But with the first 20 laps, not really much happening, waiting behind Leclerc to save his tyres. And then you, of course, had 3 safety cars during the end of the Grand Prix as well. To be fair, the drivers probably didn't do much, and they didn't do as badly, in terms of their health as they would in previous Singapore races. So, in terms of going back to Leclerc, obviously lost out in the strategy call. We obviously know that. Was unhappy on team radio as soon as he came out of the pits and saw his teammate in front of him in that red Ferrari. Was like, guys, what's going on? So I think unhappy is like the nicer term of probably what he was. He was very frustrated, and obviously you would be. When you've done so well to get pole position, and to go into the pits to find out your teammates overtaking you in it would be annoying as well. But I think in the driver's room before you go out on the podium, there was a little bit of Leclerc thinking, do I really want to talk to him, or a little bit still unhappy. But when he came out to do his interviews after, obviously, the podium and getting out of the car and everything, he was well spoken. Said everything, saying it's for the team. As a team we did great. First 1-2 ever in Singapore, if I'm correct. And so for Ferrari to get the first 1-2 in Singapore is fantastic. So I think when he came back out, he was like, this was for the team. I'm happy for the team, and obviously happy for my teammate Sebastian. But you can tell, obviously, he still wanted to win. But I think he did a very good job when he came back out to do the interviews. And he's still got a few more races to make sure he gets as many wins as possible. And even now, getting second place in the race, he's level on points with Max Verstappen. They're both third in the driver's standings. We'll look at that later on into the podcast. But yeah, great weekend for Charles Leclerc. A little bit disappointing that he doesn't get the win, but fantastic anyway. Moving on to point number 3. Red Bull and Max Verstappen. Now, going into this race weekend, and going into this podcast, I believed that Red Bull might win this weekend in Singapore just gone. I just felt they're normally very good at this circuit. I think like Christian Horner says, when they look at races before the season starts back in March, they think Singapore's a good one for us, and they're true. They've won 3 times at the Marina Bay circuit. Sebastian Vettel winning all 3 for Red Bull as well, 2011, 2012 and 2013. So they've obviously got a great record there at Singapore, and I think, I just thought they were going to win it, but in the end, 4th and 6th in qualifying isn't that great for them. I think they believed that they messed up, but whether it was set up or just during the qualifying session, they believed that they messed up. And 4th and 6th isn't great for a team that you expect to be very much competing for the pole position. And even in the end of the day, in the end of the race, 3rd place for Max Verstappen and 6th for Alex Albon. Alex Albon was okay. He's still, I think, bedding into the Red Bull, big team. I sort of 6th is okay, I think, for Alex Albon. I'll let him off with that. And 3rd for Max Verstappen is a podium for Red Bull and for Max Verstappen. Obviously not the one they wanted, but in terms of Max, that's his 6th podium of the season. So, I think they can be reasonably happy, but I think deep down they know that this was probably a race weekend that they should have been on the top step of, and I think they'll be very much disappointed with that. Now, point number 4, Antonio Giovinazzi. This guy was winning the race at one point. Now, I know winning the race probably isn't the right word. He was ahead of everybody else on the track. He wasn't net first because Sebastian Vettel, Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen were making their way back up the grid, but he was at the top and at the front of the pack for I think 6 laps it was or something. I'm not quite sure actually. Should have looked that up. But it was the first laps in the lead for an Alfa Romeo since 1983. Huge stat, that one. And he's become the first driver that's not from Mercedes, Red Bull and Ferrari to be leading a race lap this season. So credit to Antonio Giovinazzi. I think he was just really in the right place at the right time to be leading the race. But to be up there is a credit to himself. Now, he finished 10th, but after the race, I didn't know this until I was looking up for this podcast today, but he was summoned to the stewards. Now, if I just get it up, because I didn't want to get it wrong. Let's have a look. He was summoned because of what happened between George Russell and Romain Grosjean. Now, both of them come together. We're going to be talking about that, I think, a little bit later on in the podcast. But I think he believed that it was something to do with the fact that he was found guilty of ignoring instructions to stay to the right of the incident, where obviously marshals were working on trying to get rid of George Russell's car, and he obviously didn't sort of go with that and decided to do his own thing. It doesn't actually say what he was doing, but he obviously didn't go to the right of the incident, and was given a 10-second post-race time penalty. Now, he was lucky because Romain Grosjean, who was in 11th place, I think was like 20 seconds behind, so it made no difference, but he was very lucky to keep his 1 point. But he received a 10-second penalty, but stayed ahead of Grosjean, who finished 11th. So great race for Antonio Giovinazzi to finish in the points, and obviously to be the first person to lead a race lap that isn't a top 3 team. Congratulations to Antonio Giovinazzi doing a great job. So yeah, that is point number 4. Well done, Antonio. And point number 5 is Williams. Now, obviously, there's news, obviously, that Robert Kubica will not be driving for the next season. They've both parted company, as it were, so Kubica is off to do his own thing. We're not quite sure yet what he's going to be doing, but I think for in terms of his season so far, obviously been losing to George Russell quite regularly. I think in the qualifying he's not even beat him once. I'm not sure about Singapore actually, but I'm pretty sure that the record does stand. But I mean, credit to Kubica for coming back to F1. I think he's done a fantastic job from that accident he had in rally, and to now be back in F1. I think he's done what he set out to do to come back and compete. And credit to him. We've still got a few more races left of him in a Williams car this season. But that he and Williams have decided to part company. But in terms of Williams in the race, it wasn't great. They had a 100% record going into this race weekend of finishing all races this season, which is a big achievement actually, but that was ruined by Romain Grosjean. Now, I'm not giving Romain Grosjean the full amount of blame, but he always seems to be around when incidents occur. So not sure about that, Romain. But him and George Russell go into the corner. Romain Grosjean takes the inside line going into the next corner. They both just sort of tag each other, and Russell ends up in the wall. I mean, I'm not sure really who to properly blame. It could just be a driving incident, but could Romain Grosjean have just sort of backed out and tried again in another corner? Possibly, but I mean, it could just have been a racing incident. But George Russell ends up in the wall, and that's his first retirement of the season, and especially for a young driver. He was doing so well in terms of not having a DNF, and Williams actually being quite reliable in finishing all the races so far this season. So it's a shame for them. Kubica did finish, and he did finish ahead of Grosjean's teammate Kevin Magnussen. Kubica finished in 16th place, and I think he pitted for a few tyres, and I think the last couple of laps he did look competitive, but I mean, when you're still fighting at the bottom because of Williams, I mean, they've made good steps, but they're still nowhere near anyone else really. I'd say they're still right at the bottom of the driver constructor standings, and I don't think that's going to change for the rest of the season. But credit Kubica finished the race, but disappointing for George Russell to not keep that record going. But that's. On to the next point of point 6, joining in with Romain Grosjean again. And point 6 is simply Haas sticking with both of their current drivers for 2020. I mean, not quite sure why they've decided to do that. Keeping both Kevin Magnussen and Romain Grosjean. I mean, that's a partnership that's been going for 4 years in a row now. So, Grosjean's been at the team since they began. So, I suppose a little bit of loyalty, but didn't you give him that to race this season? And has he really performed? No, they've been crashing into each other more often than not. I mean, Gunther Steiner has sort of said when he announced that Grosjean was staying on, that it's very much that they're blaming the car this season in terms of not blaming the drivers. They say the car isn't good enough, and both drivers have been excellent in giving them feedback and sort of the best setups for the weekend to sort of help make this car less worse than it is. And he put in his notes when this was announced, they're both drivers give them a solid platform to continue their growth as a team. But when you look at the fact that Nico Hülkenberg is a free agent, basically, because Esteban Ocon is joining Renault alongside Ricciardo for next season, why would you not take Nico Hülkenberg? Now, I know there was some discussion in terms of Hülkenberg going, but he never got a formal offer. Gunther Steiner said they were talking with his representatives, but no official offer came in from Haas to Hülkenberg about driving for them next season. And I think it was announced at Monza that between the guys at Haas that Grosjean would be driving for him next season. But yeah, I don't know. I've heard the things that money was involved and the fact that it was cheaper to hire Grosjean than it would have been for Hülkenberg. But in terms of that, Hülkenberg would, in my opinion, be worth more than Romain Grosjean. I think he's a better driver, and I think last year he was best of the rest in terms of highest driver in the driver standings outside of the top three teams. So I think he deserves it. Obviously, I think Ricciardo coming in, Ricciardo's been a better driver for Renault this season, but again, Renault haven't really performed like they should be doing. So I feel sorry for Nico Hülkenberg. I really think he should have got that drive. There's only a few more seats really that can he get for 2020 next season. That's Williams. They haven't properly announced it yet, and obviously with Kubica going, there's definitely a seat open there. Red Bull, obviously Max Verstappen's down, and obviously George Russell for Williams. I think he'll stay, obviously. But Max Verstappen is nailed on, obviously, for Red Bull. Why would you get rid of him? And then they say it's between the two drivers at Toro Rosso and Alex Albon for their seats, so I doubt Nico Hülkenberg will get in there. Again, same with Toro Rosso. That'll just be whoever finishes to go to Red Bull. The other two will stay at Toro Rosso. And Alfa Romeo. Now, Kimi Räikkönen, I think was his deal a year? So I'm not sure yet. It might be a year with another a year onto it. So we'll see about that. And Antonio Giovinazzi. But Fred Vasseur at Singapore was saying how much Giovinazzi's improved and how they want to continue that. So again, at Alfa Romeo, I'm not sure there'll be a seat there. And it'll be an absolute shame to lose Nico Hülkenberg. I think he's so underrated as a driver, and he's been so unlucky to never get a podium. It's absolutely crazy. I think the only place really for him is Williams next season. And if Williams don't perform and get a better car for 2020, it'll be a sad way to see Nico Hülkenberg at the back of the grid every weekend. So it's a shame for him to not be at Haas, but I think Hülkenberg and Magnussen as teammates might have been a bit iffy. So maybe that was a consideration to go with. But I think Williams seems to be his only option, but that'll be interesting looking at that to see where that goes. But shame for Nico Hülkenberg if it doesn't turn out. So they are the 6 main points to look at the Singapore Grand Prix. Some other news just to look at. Alfa Romeo lost their appeal to gain their points back for the German Grand Prix. Now, Raikkonen and Giovinazzi, if I look at the notes here, they finished 7th and 8th at the German Grand Prix, which was their best results of the season, had it have stood. However, the FIA's International Court of Appeal decided that the protest was not admissible. They got 30-second race time penalties because the stewards detected irregularities with both Raikkonen and Giovinazzi's race starts in the wet conditions. They've lost their appeal, so they won't be getting them points back, which is a shame for obviously a team like Alfa Romeo that desperately need the points and would have been handy for their best results of the season. So it's a shame, obviously, for them. One little point, actually, that I didn't bring up, and it wasn't in my 6 points, was Valtteri Bottas once again being told to sort of let Hamilton go in front. Now, he said after the race that there are certain rules, and he hopes that the next time it comes around, it'll be in his favour, but as we know, it most of the time ends up in Lewis Hamilton's favour. So it's a shame for Valtteri Bottas once again to be told by James Allison. I think there's a funny story going around that every time you hear James Allison on the radio going, Valtteri, it's James, we all know what's going to happen. So shame for him. I mean, let's hope Valtteri does actually get it going his way at some point. Looking at the driver standings, just quickly, Lewis Hamilton obviously on top, 296 points. Valtteri Bottas on 231, and Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen level on 200. The constructors, Mercedes 527 points, Ferrari on 394. So, I mean, we're pretty sure that Mercedes are going to win the constructors, and probably Lewis Hamilton at this rate is easily going to win the drivers if James keeps going on the radio to tell Valtteri to slow down. So, next up is the Russian Grand Prix on Sunday at the Sochi Autodrome. Mercedes have won all 5 races that have been staged there so far, so it'll be a tough ask for everybody else. Hamilton's won 3, including last year's controversial, once again, Valtteri, can you move out the way so Lewis Hamilton can win the race? I mean, that was a very, very controversial win for Lewis Hamilton. I remember him on the podium trying to give the winner's trophy to Bottas, who really didn't want it. Let's see. I mean, Leclerc going for his 4th straight pole position in a row. Can he do that? Vettel now won his first race of the season. Can he get another victory at Russia? I mean, it'll be interesting to see. I'm actually looking forward to the Russian Grand Prix, and you can hear my thoughts and the review of the Russian Grand Prix in the next episode of the Pole Position podcast. So thank you very much for listening and watching, and I hope to be back to do the rest of the season. I know I've missed a few this year, quite a lot actually, but hoping to bring this back now, obviously until the end of the season. So thank you very much for watching and listening, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Thank you very much.
So it's Sebastian Vettel that wins the Singapore Grand Prix for Ferrari. His first race win in 391 days. 391 days he's had to wait to get his first race win again in Formula One, which is very unexpected for a 4-time world champion. But I think really the word tonight for him is relief. You know, when you don't get that form for a while, you start to wonder when is it ever going to come back, whether it's in F1 or in any sport. You know, form is very important, and to get the best of forms as well, no matter who you are, is very, very important. And Sebastian Vettel did that today in Singapore. It was an unlikely scenario at the start of the race weekend, but after what we saw in qualifying when Charles Leclerc got an unexpected pole, this weekend had full of surprises for us in a script that none of us could have written. Let's not forget as well, Leclerc got second, so a 1-2 for Ferrari. And actually the last time they won 3 races in a row was back in 2008, so it's good times at the moment for Ferrari. And you know, even though they're packing up now right behind me, you know, it's fantastic achievement. They'll of course head straight to Russia. No time to celebrate. The season goes on, still a few more races to go until we reach the finish line in Abu Dhabi in November. So Leclerc second, Hamilton didn't get podium at all. It was actually third for Max Verstappen for Red Bull. Very, very bad weekend overall really for Mercedes. And for Red Bull as well, they were hoping to do a lot better. They were one of the favourites to win the race this weekend, so it's not gone well for them at all really. Max Verstappen said in the press conference just before that he was quite disappointed. The team were quite disappointed that they didn't do much better. You know, Ferrari, the overall winners, fantastic achievement for them. It's been a fantastic week to follow the F1 here.